Good afternoon, investigators. Mike Evans with episode 282 of Spy Curious, the weekly news program for licensed investigators, loss adjusters, security risk managers, fraud controllers, government investigators, from Certificate 3 all the way through to advanced diploma levels. Great to have you along. This week we are down in beautiful Melbourne. Where we are looking at what's happening down there this week with VISIAC. Now, if you missed the last one, VISIAC is the organisation that reports to the Minister of Police and Emergency Services on the effectiveness of the regulation of the Victorian private security industry. So VISIAC meets and it has representatives from security organisations and investigation agencies and also from industry associations, and they draft, the direction and the future of security in Victoria by advising the police minister and I guess the police commissioner on issues in relation to security. So maybe 40,000 security guards, X amount of security businesses, 1,600 to 1,500 licensed private investigators, that sort of thing. So that's their role, and they meet quarterly to do this. And you don't hear a lot about it, but basically they map out the future for security in Victoria. Now, I've told you in the past, private investigators don't really get a hearing in there, but they have a seat on it, which is, well, that's a plus, okay? So we don't have a voice that's going to be heard or listened to, but we do get a seat on it. And when we have our representative voice what his concerns are, they go, no, that's for another time. Well, live with it. It's much smaller than the security industry, which is a $10 billion industry in Australia now. So there's a lot at stake, and those who have the security contracts for the airports and the ports and transport, that sort of thing, all owned in China, okay, they have the say in the direction of what goes on rather than the private investigators in what's going to happen to them. So you can go back to episode prior to this one and look at some of the issues around that. Today we're looking at delivering bad news. Now, what's that got to do with VISIAC? Well, we're talking the bigger security organisations, and they all have issues like any other corporation, security or not, government department or not, federal or not, state or not, local or not, issues that arise in the workplace. And it's our duty as private investigators to report back to the CEO or the person in charge, or even the minister in some cases, bad news. You got to do it. Now, you do it at home. I had to do it this morning. So I had to tell my dogs bad news. We're out of salt and pepper chips. All gone. They're going to have to share with me my special organic seaweed, which they're not happy about. Okay? That's pretty bad news for them. They lick it, but they don't eat it, and they don't like seaweed. They want salt and pepper chips. All right, so that's bad news for them. You do it at home every day. You run out of coffee or milk, everybody has to have soy milk or something like that. It's extremely bad news. But in these cases of investigations, it's always on a matter that affects the organisation negatively for a long period of time. If the press get hold of it, it's going to affect the minister and the minister, her or his election opportunities in the future in relation to it. So there's performance issues and monitoring issues and stuff like that that have got to be reported. Now, one of the more interesting ones that came up this week, and I hope VISIAC adopt it one day, is it was reported that the Bribery Prevention Network have identified over in Western Australia how they have their government now dealing with issues of fraud from the point of view is that the Bribery Prevention Network is marking 1 year at the commencement of Australia's first debarment regime. Now, what that means, if you've been a naughty person in government in Victoria and you want to go over to Western Australia and operate over there doing what you got away with in Victoria until you were caught, so you're going to start and do it all over again in the transport department or in shipping department or airlines or whatever you were working in, they can now debar you in Western Australia from working in their government. It's a pretty good idea. And it's something that Visiac, I don't think they're really aware of, but it's something they should consider for the future because it would solve a lot of problems. Like I told you yesterday, as an example, the largest quantity of problems that happen in a nightclub, this is something that we're all familiar with, are stopped at the entryway, okay? So dress codes enforced, tattoo codes enforced, intoxication levels are enforced. That stops trouble, well, a lot of the trouble that could happen inside. So with that debarment scheme, they haven't actually had a win on it yet. They haven't actually debarred anyone yet, but I thought it was a great idea and it was alerted to me through LinkedIn. Now, Crime Stoppers is our example today of an organisation where something crapped out as far as reputational risk goes. Pause for effect and a sip of a cup of tea. They have disassociated themselves at Crime Stoppers, which is a major member of Aylo, which links back to who's got the ear in Visiac of the Security Industry Advisory Council in Victoria, right? Now, nothing nefarious about this. This is good, okay? So at Crime Stoppers, they have said we're disassociating ourselves with Crime Stoppers International, which has an association with a couple of companies that run adult entertainment porn sites. And Crime Stoppers have come out and said, we're having nothing to do with them. We don't like that. They've given their reasons, they've given their reasons for it, saying, you know, we understand they have the right to do that, but we don't agree that it's something that, you know, we should allow for the general public who are ringing up Crime Stoppers. Right? I don't think anyone had a list of Crime Stoppers previous ringer-uppers and was spamming them or SMSing them with messages from adult entertainment websites or anything like that, right? I don't think that happened, but they've disassociated themselves. Now, interestingly, Aylo took out a full-page ad in the newspaper featuring the head of Crime Stoppers in Australia in December 2023, demanding one single security licence for the whole of Australia. Now, this was back when they had the association with the international arm of Crime Stoppers and the porn sites. So you can't sort of go, oh, look, you know, we're all good for the industry this way, but we're connected that way. The general public won't swallow it and they won't have it. So they've done the right thing and they've distanced themselves, disassociated themselves from it, have nothing to do with the international arm, are their own separate arm now in Australia. Now, someone had to give them the bad news that, look, we've done a survey, we've polled the voters, all right, and at Visiac, you want to influence the minister, right? You're going to have to disassociate yourself from the adult entertainment industry and international Crime Stoppers. And they did in Australia, okay, to their credit, they did. All right, so that's been done. But it all links back to Visiac's remit and listening to the top end of town, Aylo, of which Crime Stoppers is a member. And they actually had a president at one stage, Aylo, who was from Crime Stoppers. But that disassociation has come in now and it's been enforced. Well done, that's great. You as an investigator are going to investigate matters of code of conduct, fraud, behavioural issues, complex issues in the workplace, and you're going to have to report bad news back to the employer. So how do you go about delivering bad news? What they say is, from the research that they do, is bad news has 5 times the impact of good news. So you're walking past the newsagent, you buy yourself a scratchy, you win $5, it cost you $1.50. That's good news. You forget about it almost instantly. Someone gives you some bad news, you lay awake, can't sleep about it for the next 3 weeks. So someone comes into you, you're the CEO of the Victorian WorkSafe Authority, and says, looks like some of our staff have suggested that we associate ourselves with the AIPI, who have an association with an RTO, where the person in charge of the RTO took photos in a class without the knowledge or consent of inspectors in Toowoomba, Brisbane and Sunshine Coast councils and shared them on social networking. They were taken from behind and they're unaware of it. There was no meeting, no agenda. This wasn't authorised. They just went off and did it by themselves. You've got to deliver that news to the CEO, who is going to be quite pissed about hearing it, because your investigation has uncovered, through checking the gift registry, through interviewing those involved who completely denied any knowledge of it, outraged by the suggestion, disassociated themselves from it. It's gone. It's not going to happen now, right? And this was in a time where WorkSafe Victoria was reducing its panel members down to 12 only. And of course, mates were asking for favours of mates to guarantee future income and not be left off the panel and all this sort of thing. So it's a reputational risk nightmare for the Victorian WorkSafe Authority, who exist for the benefit of the injured workers of Victoria. You, the investigator, have just found out all this. You know, as an investigator, that people who deliver bad news are seen as untrustworthy and unlikable in workplace surveys around the world, because they are. That's the perception of them, which is kind of weird. And it's not in my experience. In my experience, I interact with multiple people who have to investigate and enforce code of conduct, inappropriate behaviour, inappropriate use of power, inappropriate conduct, inappropriate application of process, policy and procedure. That's in government. Now, in corporations, I interact with internal dispute resolution people who are internal to the insurance company who represent the claimant. And they go and check the claim and check the claims manager's call on the claim. Now, you'd think they'd be hated by all the other staff in the internal dispute resolution department of the insurance company. They'd be excluded from Friday night drinks and the Barbie and the Christmas party, and they're not in the footy club tipping. No, they're not. We're talking about professionals who expect professionals to act professionally. And if they find out something's unprofessional, they're expected to report it as part of their job role. So IDR, internal dispute resolution, are not treated like lepers within insurance companies. They're respected for what they do. And that's why they have them. And that saves issues going to AFCA, which is basically the checker of insurance companies, and where claimants can complain to if they're treated improperly by insurance companies and have their claims denied on technical issues, that sort of thing. When you are given bad news to deliver from your investigation and it's your responsibility, time is a luxury you actually have. You don't have to ring the person up. Make an appointment. CEO, I'd like to come talk to you about the outcome of our investigation. Thursday afternoon, 2 o'clock, which is tomorrow. You're available? All right, 2:30. See you then. When you're giving bad news, you have to do it confidently. You walk into the room confidently. It's your job. It's an expectation. What I'm about to tell you is not great, is what you're going to start off with. You haven't rushed straight into what happened and gone off and saying it's a major crime. You're warming up the person you have to tell by firstly being confident, secondly, by notifying your good intent. What I'm about to tell you isn't great here at WorkSafe in Victoria. I wish I had better news. What you're doing is you're humanising yourself. You see police do that with armed offenders. You see them try and talk them out of doing something silly. Now, your CEO, who you're about to deliver bad news to, isn't an armed offender. They're a professional, like I told you about before. So that's really important. It is my job to do this, and I'm here to tell you. That is your approach. If you want to be liked in delivering bad news, you probably shouldn't be a private investigator, okay? All right, so that's really important. You deliver bad news confidently. You know that you will appear unlikable. If you want to be liked, get yourself a puppy and another job. Don't be an investigator because you're not going to be liked. All the surveillance people watching this go, hey, I'm not liked 4 times, 5 times a day on a good day. They put their hand up to do that job. They know it comes with the territory and the job role. Okay, that's part of it. Giving bad news is part of the investigator's final role after their report. Your intent is always good. Remind them of that. My job is to do this and find out, and guess what? That's what you got to say. So you're in the room, they know you're coming, you've made the appointment, it's all there. What you must do is convey proactive intent. I'm here to tell you what happened. You cannot attempt to justify what the person did. He shared images of people on social media taken in class without their knowledge and consent, which is issues around power imbalance of a teacher and a student. You want to pass the course, you go along with this lady. That's a power imbalance, okay? And according to the Crimes Act, the maximum penalty can be 3 years imprisonment. You don't go looking to justify what the person did, okay? That's really important because you can't. Basically, your approach is going to be like this. It's now become urgent, and you've got to say, look, we screwed up. That's what you're going to do. If nothing is done in relation to what we now know and I'm telling you, the consequences are. Now, the CEO, who's under the pump from the minister, from the Premier, and from the Prime Minister, understands consequences. Very much so. And CEOs, they don't have a crappy little $70,000 job today. Oh, no. Their income and their expenses are much, much higher than that. And a lot is at stake for them. To help you deliver the bad news, it's important to understand a little bit of psychology. Who are you going to be delivering it to? How do they normally react to bad news? Do they overreact? Do they react emotionally? Is that cry? Think about it before you go and do it. Your role here in delivering the bad news is to educate and inform. Now, you've heard me say this in investigations uni, in our Australian Security Academy training videos for investigators. Think back to when you played sport. You lined up every Saturday for the netball or the basketball or the hockey or the footy or the cricket or the indoor cricket or pickleball, whatever you played. Every Saturday you lined up and you played the game. Now, some of you played extremely seriously and almost professionally, and you're horse riding, jumping and all that sort of thing. You were very good at it. Others socially did it, that's fine. But before you played the game, twice that week you went to practice throughout the season. So you practiced your art of your sport. Investigators practice the art of delivery. Police practice the art of questioning. You'll hear Pat Flynn often refer to a murder case in Victoria where the murderer had done it a couple of times before. This murderer was totally familiar with police techniques and questioning, and the police knew that. They're going to give him a record of interview and they want him to confess to the crime. And they know that he knows what they're going to do. So before doing this in relation to what they had to do, and these are police, they had a meeting a couple of times before they interviewed this guy, and they practiced scenarios of asking questions. And if this reply was given, they would then do this, or they would then ask that, because he would respond in this way. So they practiced what they were going to do and got prepared and were ready for it. It didn't just happen without any options being available to them. And eventually the person was charged with murder. He was convicted and jailed. And it was very well done by the Victorian police. Very, very well done. So you practice the art. Now, what I want you to do most of all is be confident in your approach, but there's one other thing. Wrong video, sorry. Having a cup of tea. I want you to get used to being uncomfortable. It's going to be uncomfortable delivering the bad news about the confronting issue of inappropriate behaviour that's now tarred the department. All right. You must be comfortable with being uncomfortable. You'll find that during your process of conducting records of interview. You'll be asking some very hard questions, and you must get comfortable about doing that. That's really, really important. To get comfortable and being uncomfortable and to practice, you can knock up a few bullet points that you can practice for. Appear confident. Use your private investigator voice. Okay. Give notice of good intent. What I'm about to tell you isn't great. There's 3 things you can have in your bullet points. Bounce off a colleague what you're about to do or say. Okay, so there are ways you can practice it, get familiar with it, be comfortable with being uncomfortable. There are always ways that you can do better if you practice. So keep that in mind. So when you go into the CEO and you know what this person's like, you know they're professional. like the internal dispute resolution people in insurance companies who are comfortable with being uncomfortable, okay? And their fellow workers whose claims get paid when they don't want them paid are comfortable with that too. It's all part of the process. They don't take it personally. Now, the CEO, the professional CEO, isn't going to take it personally either. This is what's going to happen. You're going in to deliver the bad news. The professional CEO wants to know these 4 issues. Now, this is the crux of our presentation today. What happened? Why should I care? How did it happen? What are we going to do about it? That's what you must have prepared for your bad news delivery. This is what happened. You should care about this because the consequences are. It happened because they skirted around the Victorian Police Licensing Regulation Division's conditions of approval for registered training organisations 120 occasions. That's your delivery. What are we going to do about it? Well, we're going to plug those gaps. The knowledge, skill, information or attitude gap that was exploited as an organisation here at Victoria WorkSafe, we're going to plug those gaps. How are we going to plug those gaps? Education of staff, rewriting of policy, process and procedure, asking for penalties for misuse of social media in relation to commitments to the workplace or supplies to government or whatever. You must have those suggestions ready and show the person you're reporting to your plan for this. And you've heard me say it until I'm blue in the face. Your responsibility with Certificate 4 in government investigation or fraud control, that's sort of whatever it is not laying waste to the entire department, accusing everybody in it of inappropriate use of images on social networking without the knowledge and consent of the victims in the government department. All right. You don't do that. No. Your role is to identify what happened, factually, report the facts, what happened, why the CEO should care, how did it happen, and what are you going to do about it? Now, what you're going to do about it is you're going to assist the organisation to contribute to the acceptance of the findings in your investigation. And that can be done through fraud control awareness, through the newsletter, through the intranet, through presentations, but you're going to be upfront about it. This is what happened. Despite everything we had in place, this is how they did it. These were the consequences. Now, we must accept that it happened. It's embarrassing. We've lost a lot of money. Okay. It's no use agonising over that. It's not your money. It's just the department's. We now rebuild as an organisation, move forward and get on with what we are here to do. Now at Victoria WorkSafe, they are there to support the injured workers of Victoria. That's what they're there for. That's what part of the rebuilding process is going to be your responsibility, helping them to move forward in doing that. So bad news, yes, we have to deliver it. Yes, it's part of our role. Yes, it's uncomfortable doing it. You must be comfortable with being uncomfortable. That's very important. Because if you can't handle that, you probably shouldn't be a government investigator, government fraud controller, government investigations manager, or advanced diploma of government investigations workplace inspection holder of a qualification. You have to be able to do that. So they're very important issues, and it comes out this week because VISIAC is on in Melbourne. Aylo are a big influence on VISIAC. Okay, they're a very big influence on VISIAC, and Crime Stoppers, who are a major supporter of Aylo and member of Aylo, the industry association, the peak body, they claim, for security in Australia, are influencing VISIAC this week about what's going on. Even the big ones have issues. And it's a reputational risk issue that they plugged the knowledge, skill, information or training gap on by disassociating itself with the international arm of Crime Stoppers. So it happens. Bad news has to be delivered. Sometimes you'll send in a report, nothing will happen. You won't even have to go and talk to anyone about it. It's done, it's dealt with. You'll never know. Other times, and in particular when the reputational risk is very high, that's when you'll be delivering that bad news as a private investigator. If you're an internal government investigator, it'll be quite continual. Often it will be a result of a ministerial. If you don't know what that is, you can see that in our presentations in the Australian Security Academy course resources for government investigations and private investigations are all there. You can know what a ministerial is. And ministerials don't just happen in Victoria, they happen in every state and territory. And if you get one, a sense of urgency will really be coming into your investigation practices. So be confident in delivering bad news. Understand that your intent in delivering bad news isn't nasty. It's good intent is where it's coming from, and communicate that. Know the potential reaction of the person who you are delivering the news to. Practice your delivery, have bullet points, and practice the scenario with a colleague before you go in to give you extra familiarity with that situation. You can do that, okay? And know what the answers are to what happened. Why should I care? Why did it happen? What are we going to do about it? Have the staff contribute to the acceptance of the findings, rebuild and move forward. I'm Mike Evans from the Australian Security Academy. You've been watching episode 282 of Spy Curious, the weekly investigation news program for government investigators, government fraud controllers, government code of conduct investigators, private investigators, risk managers, mercantile agents and loss adjusters in Australia.